Hi everyone, Michael and Jamie here, back with another top 5. And today's top 5 is top 5 financial mistakes rich families make with their kids.
Yeah, this is a great topic. And one thing I want to make clear up front is that, we all want to help our kids. We just don't want to do things with money that can actually hurt them.
Correct.
So we're going to try to fine line. We don't want this to come across as like we don't think you should help your kids. So.
Yep. Number 5 is giving kids wealth without responsibility.
I think a good example of this would be, Jamie and I were talking about, if you help your kids to buy a car, maybe they could pay for part of the auto insurance or something like that so that they have some skin in the game and, appreciate the generosity, the gift that you've given them.
Correct. And how do you give without enabling? How do you teach responsibility when money isn't scarce? These are the things we're going to dive into, and giving kids wealth without responsibility can be a tricky one. Yeah. So make sure you're doing that wisely. Number 4, never talking about money. Ooh, this is a good one, Michael.
This is a really good one, and I think it could be ranked higher because most families do not want to talk about money. In fact, American Funds Capital Group did a study, and they found that the most taboo topic socially is money. More than sex, drugs, you name it. And with kids, it's often just we're not going to talk about it. And while we wouldn't suggest you necessarily need to disclose what your income is and what your net worth is, talking about money is very important, whether that be budgeting, planning for the future, helping them understand things like compounding wealth. And, when we do that, we create a strong foundation for our kids and reduce the risk that they're going to rely on what they hear from social media and, their peer group as far as, what they should be doing with their money to help them get a strong start financially.
Yeah, and this can be a really sticky subject depending on how you grew up. There's a lot of psychology. Psychology of Money covers this. I don't know if anyone else has read that book. That's a great book. But they cover how did you grow up and what are your ties to money. Well, this is one thing that if you weren't taught to talk about money at a young age and you didn't grow up doing that, this can be a very sticky subject. As a matter of fact, if you think about the top 3 conversations not to have at holidays, which is sex, money, and religion, right? So money is right in there as the top 3 taboo topics to talk about. Well, we're here to debunk that and actually just go against the grain and say, no, there is no age that's too early to start talking about money with your kids. Just have those age-appropriate conversations. And we're, like Michael mentioned, we're not saying that you have to be an oversharer, but transparency is just building a framework, right? You're not sharing every single secret and every single debt you have and what you're making in your job potentially, but have those age-appropriate conversations with your kids. For example, Michael's kids are a lot younger than mine. I have 2 kids that are a junior and a senior in high school, so they're about to go out to college. And one of our big college conversations was, well, how much do all of these colleges cost? And let's look at that. How much do we have saved for you for college? And they would say, well, where are we supposed to make the rest if the college costs X amount? Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's talk about that because money is important and college costs money. So they have both made some really, really wise decisions on where they want to go. But that's because we started talking about this when they were in middle school. So I think it's very important to talk about money. Whatever you do with your kids, please talk about it.
It doesn't grow on trees.
It does not. Number 3, funding lifestyle instead of purpose. Michael, what do we have to say about this?
Unfortunately, we've all seen situations where, we want to help our kids and we want them to have a strong start and, support them in times of need. But when we're helping fund spending, beyond things like education, a down payment on a house, help them get us started with a business, we can actually hurt them by creating a lifestyle expectation that they're not going to be able to maintain on their own, which could lead to things like resorting to them using credit cards or things of that nature that are going to be detrimental to their long-term financial success. So, we want to help our kids. We also want to create, a good level foundation, for them of ownership and, not frivolous spending. And when we fund those kinds of things, they can develop bad habits.
Yeah, and this is a hard one, right? Because we don't want our kids to struggle, right? We want to give them things. We want to give them opportunities. And a lot of times parents think that the more we give them and the more things they have, sets them up for more success. Well, that's not necessarily true, right? So we want to help them co-invest in goals and set parameters and a framework for their life instead of just funding the things that they want. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense.
Okay, great. Well, let's jump into number 2, rescuing adult children financially. Why can this be harmful, Michael?
Boy, this is a hard one because no one wants to see anyone they love struggle, especially a child. But I'll just give you an example. Early on in my career, I was in consumer lending at Wells Fargo, and there was a situation where someone that I was working with that had accrued $70,000 of credit card debt. We were looking for ways to, consolidate this, pay it off faster. They didn't qualify for it on their own as far as any lending solutions. So they brought in their parent to be able to co-sign on the loan for them. And it was a difficult conversation because I remember their parent was like, oh, now I got to bail my deadbeat son, out a second time because he can't, stop spending. And they didn't learn their lesson the first time. And I'm not sure if they learned their lesson the second time. So I think it's a fine line between like enabling bad behavior and, a serious situation where someone's got a health issue or lost a job, where they're really, you want to be able to help them, not enable them to do things that are, long-term going to be insurmountable and create bad behavior. So.
And this is going to be subjective. This is going to be different for everyone. It's a unique situation. You're really going to have to use your gut on this because as a parent, you are going to have to distinguish between a genuine crisis and a pattern of poor decisions. Okay, so you have to start thinking, is this becoming a pattern? Is this a repeatable offense like your client at Wells Fargo? Or is this a genuine crisis where a little bit of money really can help with that?
Well, and one thing I want to interject here, and I think Dave Ramsey, the radio TV personality, has done a good job of pointing this out. When you help kids financially, there's a couple different ways you can go about it. One is you just gift them the money. Another is attaching it to a loan. And to the extent that you're going to do it and you're able to help, I think gifting is the right way to go. When you extend a loan, that kind of changes the nature of the relationship to the point that, you've got an outstanding loan to the child and you're at Thanksgiving dinner and they're talking about some vacation that they're going on and you're a little upset, like, hey, I've got this loan out there and you're taking this fancy vacation. I think the manner in which you're helping, if you've got the ability to help, do it. Maybe setting it up as a loan or something might sound good, but I'd actually fall on the other side of the equation. I'd want to gift it. What do you think?
I was going to agree. I think that a better way to say that is the money should be just freely given, right? Maybe it can come with some parameters as far as the child knows that this is a loan, we want you to pay me back, but you have to go into it with a heart of generosity and saying, if this never gets paid back, that's going to be okay. I'm going to give this to the child because what you don't want to happen and what Dave Ramsey really nails, he kind of hits this nail on the head, is you don't want there to be bitterness attached with it, right? So borrowing from family can be very, very tricky, and you don't want there to be any bitterness with the money that's being passed down to your kids. So just have it be freely given, give it as a gift. Also,
Don't enable.
I know.
This is one where there's obviously some discretion involved. I guess if you thought that this was a situation where the money would be, you're helping them in a situation where they, really need it and you're able to go for it.
Yep.
But don't create more issues than you're solving.
Yep. Agreed. All right. That brings us to number one. Number one for top 5 financial mistakes that rich families make with their kids is leaving large inheritances with no guidance. Michael, what does this mean?
It means exactly what you just said, is if you leave money to the kids, we could spend it while we're here, we can give it away while we're here, or we can leave it when we're gone. That's what our options are. If you leave it with no guidance, and, I've seen this, recurrently my partner has seen this, it will tear your family apart. There's a strong risk that, people will come in, there's going to be a chance for confrontation, dispute. It gets ugly, and the last thing you wanted was to, leave this money to your kids and then their relationship fractures because they don't agree on how the money is distributed or whatever it is. And so, take some time up front to outline. A letter is a good idea, or even a simple meeting. You don't have to go through the dollar amounts, but letting people know what your wishes and thoughts are before you're gone can really save a lot of problems and headaches on the back end.
Yep. Have family meetings. Have family meetings where everyone's a part of it. Everyone's hearing the same thing from your mouth. This is what I'm hoping you will do with this inheritance. It doesn't have to be a large inheritance, just any inheritance. And just so you know that behind the scenes, most families say, oh, not my family. My kids won't fight over that. They definitely won't fight over money. And this is one of the biggest things that tears families apart after a loved one passes away. So be very cognizant.
Dozens of times.
Yes.
Like we're, you really need to address it.
Yeah, address it.
That's number one.
Have letters of intent. Have a trust drawn up with your wishes made clear. Have a third-party trustee who can go ahead and be the executor. I know you have.
No, that's a great point. And I'll just give you a personal example. So my dad wanted me to be the executor of his estate when he's gone. And well, it might make sense because, I'm in wealth management financial services. Having the experience that I do, I didn't want to have even the appearance of some sort of conflict with the settlement of that estate between my brother and sister. So I recommended using a third party, that is independent of all three of us. So there is no debate there. And, I think, doing that removes any potential, viewpoint of, oh, this is fair, this is not. And one thing I want to make clear is that equal is not necessarily fair. Okay. And so, not everyone has to get the same thing. Maybe, one of the children worked in the family business and they're going to inherit that. You don't have to equal out, well, did they earn that? And, well, there's some things you would want to consider there, but you just need to communicate it up front and make sure that your intentions are understood before it's too late.
Be intentional about financial education, whether that's what you're leaving behind or what you're giving right now. Just be intentional about the education behind it. What Michael and I really like is when we have clients and they bring their kids, whether they're adult kids or they're teenagers, they bring them to meetings and they want them to know, hey, here's the situation. Here is the wealth transfer that's going to be passed down to your shoulders. Here's what we intend to do with that wealth. We love meeting the next generation and helping be a piece of that education, being a piece of that, the inheritance wishes. So if you have a financial advisory team, please introduce your kids to that team. I think that's one of the best things you can do.
Right.
Yep. So, okay, you guys, that was top 5 mistakes that rich families make with your kids. Let's go ahead and do a rundown one more time. Number 5 is giving kids wealth without responsibility. Number 4 is never talking about money. Please talk about your money with your kids. Number 3 is funding lifestyle instead of purpose. Number 2 is rescuing adult children financially. And finally, number 1 was leaving large inheritances with no guidance. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time.